Good evening and welcome to tonight's episode of Good and Well. Tonight I'm super excited because I'm connecting with yet another one of my Instagram followers who I've met along this health and fitness journey and along my road. Her name is Lauren Burke, and Lauren is going to be talking to us about disability inclusion in fitness, and I'm really excited about that. We've talked about disability inclusion a couple weeks ago with Lauren, and we spoke about autism and the workforce. So today we're going to be talking about inclusion in fitness, and I cannot wait to get this started. We're also going to have a little bit of a conversation about what's going on in the current media with the AAPI community and just everything that's happening as well, because Lauren is Korean, and I just want to give her a chance to speak out and say whatever she'd like to say and share with us how to become better allies as well, before we get started into everything in fitness. But we definitely need to address what is going on in this country right now, and I feel like this is a perfect space and opportunity to do that as well. So I'm going to bring Lauren on. Again, I'm super excited to have Lauren on. We have so much to talk about, and I have never met Lauren before either. So just like most people that I have interviewed on here, we have not actually met in person. Hello, Lauren.
Hello, I'm so excited for this.
I know, me too. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and just share your heart with us and share what it is that you do. I'm super excited.
Yeah, me too. I have to admit, like, you're one of the first like Orange Theory coaches that I started following on social media. And so when you were like, "Hey, do you want to be on Good and Well?" I had a moment. I was like, "Oh my gosh."
Well, thank you. I'm so excited. I love the Orange Theory community because of the fact that I've gotten to meet so many people, and I've actually connected with so many members and so many that aren't even at my studio, which is kind of the crazy part. I'm like, oh, I have all these members that I have at my studio, but so many members I've never met that that go to different studios that I've connected so well with and been just so blessed with those relationships as well.
Yeah, it's really great. I love the community piece there.
Yeah, I know. It's different. We're back, but we're outdoors, and so it's a little different, with the distance and trying to have community still. And I know I saw that you went back to classes
I
this
did.
week, and it's a little different. Are you guys indoors or outdoors?
Yeah, so we're indoors. Our particular studio doesn't require masks while you're working out. I tried it, y'all. For any of you who are doing it in a mask because it's mandatory or because you just prefer it, I gotta give props because I did it a couple of times and it is hard. Like coming
Right.
up with a mask on is difficult. So applause for all of you who are powering through that.
I know. I was like, we're gonna have these generations of like superhuman athlete babies because they're gonna like evolve into having these great lung capacity because we've been working out in masks and things like that. So we're gonna be like altitude, and we're gonna be like running. All of our children are just gonna be super fit when they come out. But I'm just so excited that you're here. And before we even get started, and I talked to you a little bit about this and before we got started, because obviously I gave you the questions and in advance of kind of everything that happened last night in Atlanta. And I just wanted to give you a space. You're a Korean woman, and I want to give you a space to be able to kind of talk about what's going on or what happened and how we can be better allies, because I know over the summer there was so much Black Lives Matter, and I felt so supported by so many people, you included, and I just want to give you that same opportunity to have this space to really share your heart, share how you feel, give us just any way that you feel that we can, it's not your responsibility to educate, of course, but if there's anything you would like to share, I want to give you that space to do so.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I so appreciate the acknowledgement just of the fact that these events are happening. So for anyone who doesn't know, I'll try to keep it super broad strokes because I know if there's any people who identify as Asian American, like a lot of this is super triggering. The last news report I saw, so don't quote me if I'm wrong, was 6 Asian American women, and I think either a total of 8 or 9 individuals total were killed in 3 separate locations by a white male in his 20s. The majority of his victims were women and were Asian, and so obviously those communities are really having a hard time just beginning to understand the events that transpired and how to begin processing that amidst the coronavirus, COVID-19,
Mm-hmm.
just rise in hate crimes. I think I saw this morning from Stop AAPI. I hate that there's like over, I want to say it's like 3,700 incidents reported, and that's just a portion of what's been reported, right? I think there's this misconception that anytime something happens, somebody reports it, but a lot of the Asian community is afraid to even step forward and say, like, we've been victims of this racial profiling or injustice or things like that. And so that's just a portion of what's actually been true. I know for me, today has been a really strange day. So I just want to name that I'm like super excited to talk about disability inclusion and fitness, because that's like my jam. It's what I'm so passionate about. I'm glad this conversation is still happening, even amidst the events of this day. But I'll just acknowledge that my headspace today has not been where it would be on a normal day. And so as a woman, as an Asian American, as a Korean, I am just grieving the loss of human life. You know, whether or not it was a hate crime, which I'll call it that, you know, but the media will say one thing. We don't know the perpetrator, what he truly felt in his heart. We can't assume that. But for me, I'll call it hate crime. And so it's just it's heavy. It's a lot, and there's a lot of grief for the fact that these were people. Even if you want to remove they were Asian from the conversation, the fact is an individual killed 8 other individuals, 9 other individuals, and so that in of itself should be enough to grieve. But adding all the complexities and layers of women and ethnic identity on top of that is just a lot. And so, that's kind of where I'm at coming into today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing. And I just really appreciate everything that you do share. And we'll give everybody your social media and everything, because you always drop a lot of good information about the recent events, and then also just what we're going to be talking about here shortly about disability inclusion. And so you're such a wealth of knowledge to follow. And I've actually learned so much from following you and having conversations with you. So we'll have the information for everybody so they can follow you and really learn a little bit more about everything. And I know you're really open about your adoptive experience and also how that plays into everything going on as well. So it's just you have a really great bit of information, and just there's so many things that I could have talked to you about. You know, it's interesting. I'm like, man, I could ask her about this, or I could ask her about this, and so there's so many conversations and topics that you're a wealth of knowledge on. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and give you space for that. So at any time, you know, just feel free to, and some things may be intersectional here. So if we cross over and turn into tangents, that's fine too. But before we get into some more of the fitness, I just want to give you a chance to kind of explain to everybody. So you are a woman that has cerebral palsy, and you are also a fitness trainer, which is amazing to me. And I know we talked at the very beginning, you're like, yeah, I'm going to get my certification. And I kind of had seen before you would actually have the certification, you're kind of like in the way and almost there, I believe, is where you were at with that. And so for those that don't understand, can you explain a little bit about what CP is, how it affects your body systems, for people that are not sure?
Yeah, absolutely. And this was a good chance. This is, so March is Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month. It's been kind of hard to post about that constantly in the midst of everything else going on. I've been trying to, put out as much information or share other content that people are putting out that's really helpful in that space. So I actually wrote it down because I don't want to get it wrong. Because the thing is like, I only experience one piece of CP, but the spectrum is really wide. And so I wanted to get all of my information right. So cerebral is of the brain. Like if we're going to define it, cerebral means of the brain, and palsy is lack of muscle. So it's a neuromuscular condition. It affects both the brain and the muscles. It's a singular event that triggers it. So in of itself, it's not degenerative. Like, for instance, another neuro condition would be MS. That progressively could get worse. CP in and of itself does not do that, but the way you experience it, and as you age, like it can feel degenerative, even though the condition itself is not worsening.
Got it.
And there are 4 different types. So the most common is spastic cerebral palsy. So that's what I have. And it just means high muscle tone and sometimes some uncontrollable movements. There's also ataxic and dyskinetic, which both represent 6% of the population. And then the remainder of that is people who have mixed. And that can present either in the legs on one side of the body or in all 4 limbs or a variety of those things. So I have spastic diplegia, which is in the legs, but that doesn't mean that sometimes my arms won't be affected. It just means the majority of the condition exists in my lower body.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that and giving a little bit more knowledge and sharing that with us. So what made you decide to become a personal trainer? What was it in you was like, you know what, this is my jam. This is what, thrills me and brings me excitement.
Yeah, well, I have to give credit to another person for even kind of putting that spark in my head. So I know we talked briefly about Orange Theory, our connection, you as a coach and me as a member right now. And I had a coach once that in the middle of a class, I hate the rower, by the way. So if you're an Orange
You're
Theory
not
person
alone.
and you have preference of station, I hate the rower. But I was rowing and she came up to me and was just like, something, when you become an Orange Theory coach someday or a fitness trainer someday, I don't remember the exact words. And then she just like smiled and walked away. And I continued rowing, but was really confused. It was like, I need more context to just you dropping a comment like that and walking away, even if you are coaching a class. And so she just sort of affirmed that I had this place and space in fitness to really potentially make a difference if it was something I was super passionate about and ended up wanting to pursue and do. It was almost like she knew that I needed to hear that before I even knew I needed to hear that. And so I have to give credit to Katie if she ever watches this or if she's on here. I owe it to her for putting the idea in my head. But once that kind of happened, I think the affirmation from me internally was I get this opportunity to be the person that I didn't have when I was a kid or an early adulthood, young adulthood. I didn't have doctors or physical therapists or family members in my corner saying like, you should exercise. It was more, don't do that, it's dangerous, maybe you'll get hurt, which isn't untrue, but it just wasn't maybe as helpful as it could have been. And so I think what keeps me going every day is just I want to be a visible representation of what could be possible for someone like me who didn't figure that out till I was 28 years old.
Yeah, and representation is so important in every space, I think, but especially in the fitness space and wellness space, because there is not a ton in a lot of different in many spaces. There's not, in many ways, there's not a ton of diversity in fitness spaces. There's in any way, whether it be disability or whether it be in, race or whatever it is, it's just very one track, a lot of it. So what got you into getting into fitness? You said when you were in your late 20s, when was that? What was that was like, I want to work out. I want to start getting fit. I want to, that kind of led you into working out before you were like, okay, now I'm going to make this something I can do as a career.
Yeah. So ironically, I didn't have a moment where I was like, oh yeah, working out sounds great. Those people that get up at 6 a.m. And I say that because I'm now one of those people that gets up and goes to a class at 6 a.m. But, looking at that example, it was like, no, I don't want that. But when I started receiving, so I get Botox treatments for my legs. And I think a lot of people oftentimes equate Botox with the injections that you get to reduce wrinkles in your face or cosmetic treatment, which it's used for, but it's also used medically to reduce the spasticity and tone in your muscles so that you have better mobility, range of motion for a period of time. It eventually wears off, but I began getting those treatments to kind of help with some of the stiffness that I was experiencing and the pain that comes from being so stiff. And my neurologist pretty much it was imperative. He said, I will not give you these treatments if you don't have some sort of regular movement plan to include physical therapy, but you also need to start moving on your own, and maybe that means exercise or yoga, you decide.
Got it.
So I needed to get involved in it, but I knew I wasn't going to stick with it if I was doing it by myself, because I had been to gyms before, you know, on and off the YMCA or any box gym, and tried to do it on my own and quit after 2 weeks about 5 or 10 different times. So
right, you're like, that was enough.
I'm not about this. So whatever I did, it had to be something I could do in community. And a friend just happened to mention Orange Theory, and the first class was free. So I was like, well,
yeah,
why not? I'm not losing anything by going except for an hour if I hate it. And ended up having a great coach the first time and really loved it. And so I thought, yeah, I could do this. And it really has turned into community, like with the coaches, some of my friends that are like my workout accountability people now. So yeah, I don't think I had one of those moments, but it's sort of morphed into that.
Yeah, it's incredible how, you know, those suggestions turn into something else, which turns into then you got another suggestion, and it kind of just, and I know you're also a believer, so just like the connections and how it all fits together and is supposed to, I think that's really incredible. On my side, I'm like, man, God is good, because it's just like those little moments that weave together and create our stories, I think are so beautiful and just lead us to where we're supposed to go. And like, even knowing this conversation is on that path and on the where we're supposed to go. So I just love that you have that story of someone kind of just planting the seed of like, you know, when you're a coach and you're like, what, you know, what are you talking about? So that's beautiful. I really like that. Have you felt any personal insecurities around becoming a trainer over your time?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, I'm still really new in it. So I've had my certification almost a year, but I have a typical full-time job as well. So it's hard to balance sort of that transition, and what does that really look like?
Yeah.
You know, does that look like teaching Group X like Orange Theory? Does it look like one-to-one coaching? What is you know, does it look like advocacy work on behalf of trainers and gyms and educational piece?
Right.
So I'm still trying to work out what all that looks like now that I have the certification, but I'm all the time, because I think one of the most obvious things is CP is a physical condition, right? So when we're talking about being a fitness trainer, 2 big things. Number one, can you demo exercises for your clients or provide a way for that to be done if you physically can't? What does that look like in commercial spaces that already have their own programming and setup?
Right.
Is there any way to flex that for someone like me who's not your typical coach and can't necessarily produce the same experience in the same way? So yeah, that's a thing for me all the time. And then the second is just a safety concern, right? If I'm coaching clients, am I strong enough to catch them if they fall, or provide measures so that if they're at risk for injury, I'm putting things in place to mitigate that if I can't use my physical body to help do
right. Yeah, that's really, and there's so many reasons for all of us to feel, I think, insecure in a situation, but that just, you know, that's always that extra level. And I mean, I think just so you know, I have so many insecurities, some of those same ones. Can I keep people safe? Can I protect them? If this person decides to do this, can I actually, like, can I lift that weight off of their body if it goes falling on them? So I have many of those same insecurities that you have too. So it is a very demanding and physical job. It is something that, I think I didn't realize, even getting into it, how physically demanding it was for me. And I was like, man, like, this is actually, like, I walk a lot more. I mean, I stopped when COVID came and I stopped training. I was like, I don't walk at all. I get like 0 steps. I'm looking at my watch, you know, I'm like, okay, cool. I guess I was, you know, I was active. Like, I'm not so active anymore. So it is just one of those jobs that's, that is already to begin with that. So what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions about athletes with disabilities?
That individuals with disabilities aren't athletes. I think, I mean, you just said it. I think probably the biggest misconception is that We don't necessarily in the fitness industry at large consider the disabled population. It's not on the probably top 5 or top 10 list when people are making a list of things to consider when starting a program or starting a gym. That's not something that's on people's minds. And I think if you have a body and you're moving it, then you're an athlete. That's my personal take. Maybe it's a hot take, but it's my personal take.
I completely agree with you.
I think that we're missing the mark on that entirely by almost unconsciously automatically excluding
it's exclusion
to begin with.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's full on exclusion of I think it's been interesting because I'm in like an Orange Theory coaches group, and there'll be people that come on and say, hey, I have, a deaf client and I'm not sure how to communicate with this person. And it's things like that make me realize that I don't either, and I've had someone that's come to me and said, I'm hard of hearing and could you have different cues for me? And so as a coaches team, we decided to come up, with ways that we could help this person out. But eventually they didn't stay. And I think that probably some of it was that it wasn't catered to them exactly. And so when people come up with those questions in coaching groups, it makes me realize how unprepared we are as fitness professionals to deal with anybody that's not exactly like we are. It's like they don't fit exactly what we see as an athlete or what society deems as an athlete or a person that works out. If you're outside of that exact bubble, then we don't think of ways to accommodate you. And it just always stands out to me because we have this question. So I've seen this question maybe 5-6 times per year, in this Orange Theory coaches group. And it's like, after all these times that we've asked questions, why hasn't there been any training of like, here you go, here are some cues. If you have somebody that is hard of hearing, if you have someone that is, has this happening, here's how you can help them. And it's just interesting because I'm like, wow, every time it comes up, I think we really have a long way to go, but then it just kind of disappears. We never really address it again until someone else again is like, what have you done to, if someone's been hard of hearing? And then every coach that's dealt with it kind of puts their opinions in. And that's kind of the end of it, which is really disappointing because I think it's a great opportunity for not pointing on Orange Theory at all. I'm not saying like this is an Orange Theory problem because I guarantee it happens in every fitness studio across the country, across the world. But it's just like something that just shocks me every time of like, why are we not finding ways to accommodate more people?
Yeah. And I think, so 2 things to your point. I totally agree that it's a broader problem in the fitness industry and community. But one of the things that really, I'm not going to put it all on the trainers, right? Because I only have the disability that I have and I can name it and I can own it. But there's a lot, like you mentioned, maybe visually impaired or hard of hearing. Like I don't experience that. So I have the same questions as you. It's like, oh, how would I cue? Or how would I modify to be able to help someone like that? So I'm not going to put it all on coaches and say like, you got to do a better job because that wouldn't be fair. But I'm also going to call out like the industry at large. Like, I know that certification is not necessarily regulated, but when I was going through the textbook for the certification I have, I was like, I don't see anywhere in here where anyone close to what I would experience is even representative. Represented. We had a section on common things like diabetes, aging, and I understand all that. It's important, and those are large populations that are common to gym and fitness. But I think the fact that there are so few certifying agencies that even have add-ons or within the initial certification or complete programming to address some of these needs, that's a huge miss. And there are spaces that are working on that. There are organizations and groups and different subsets of the fitness industry that are moving forward with those types of things. But I think that the educational piece is a huge thing that's missing for coaches. We're not going to just put it all on them and say, more. It's also, you haven't been equipped.
Right. It's like, where am I getting that information from? And as a organization, like an Orange Theory or an F45 or what have it be, where are they doing the education to then trickle it down to their coaches where they can be educated? Because there needs to be some responsibility up at that highest level of, here is where we're seeing we could be a better service, and we could take it to the next level of our service and then trickle it down to teach the coaches how to be a better service to those clients. And I think it's unfortunate because we do put in people in a space where people with disabilities are like, this gym does it, I don't belong, I don't fit here, this isn't for me. And they never try it because they don't think it's tailored to them. And it's true, it's not tailored. And unless you have somebody that is educated or willing to do the work and understand, or people that are willing to give education to those people that are coaching, it's very hard. And so it's very unfortunate because there are people that may want to go on this journey or be like, okay, I want to get in fitness, but it's not made for me because, like you said, they don't see anybody that looks like them. And you're saying, when you were coming up, you didn't have doctors or anybody telling you that you should work out, or, hey, be careful, that's dangerous, is what you got. And so now you're being that, that example that you wish you had when you were younger, but it's so far and few between. It's just like, we really need to get that out there, and we're not doing a good enough job within the fitness industry to say you are welcome here.
Yeah, and I think that also comes down to not only educating but marketing, right? If I don't see myself in your product or in your service, on your flyers, and I'm not saying it has to be overt and blaring, but if your initial information and the photos or content that goes along with that doesn't address disability, or doesn't speak to the fact that I could maybe even be brave enough to call and say, hey, this is what I want to do, here's what's happening with me. Because I was scared but brave enough to do it, right? I called an Orange Theory and said, hey, this is what's going on, but I want to try a class. And thankfully I had a studio that was willing to meet with me early, try to understand things. Right. But I don't think that that's widely the experience that people are getting in any space, whether it's a one-to-one coach or a franchise or a corporate big box gym with trainers that are on staff. I don't think that that's an experience that people are getting, is seeing in the marketing that there's even a place for them to enter the conversation, let alone having to self-advocate.
Yeah, and that kind of actually brings me to my next question, was about Nike's new adaptive shoe, the FlyEase, and so this shoe was brought about by a consumer who said, we need laceless or tieless shoes that I can slip my foot in, it can adapt around my foot. And then I'm like kind of researching, looking a little bit about it. His name's Matthew, and he had CP, and he's going through and showing, this was his idea 9 years ago, I believe. It was quite some time ago, and that's now something that Nike is adapting. Then I go on to look a little bit about it, and it's not marketed that way at all. It looks like just some cool new shoe that you don't have to tie. There is nothing that shows me that, and it just says, this shoe is designed for all athletes with an asterisk. And I'm like, what is this? I know what the shoe is, and because I've read the story about the man behind it, but I just was so disappointed when I looked on then to Nike's site, and I was like, this isn't representative at all of what you're trying to do, other than to put an asterisk of all athletes. And that's so vague. That is so vague to say this is for all athletes. Like, well, what is the point? So from your perspective, that's my perspective of what I saw, and I was like, I'm very frustrated. So I can only imagine how you feel about it, but I was like, this is ridiculous. I was a little bit outraged, but what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah. So I echo for sure. Saying all athletes, I don't find anything wrong with you marketing it to a wider population, right? Because that is, you're a for-profit business. Nike is a for-profit business. So I'm not saying that's wrong, but it sort of feels like you can't even acknowledge the origin. You don't have anyone who even remotely looks like they might have some sort of visible disability, or you're not making it known in the videos, in the clips. Nothing on that, like Nike.com/FlyEase or whatever it was. Because after you asked me this question, I actually went and looked.
Mm-hmm.
And nowhere do I see that represented. I don't even remember if Matthew Walzer's name was on that page.
I did
And so
not see it.
for him to have been involved in sending a letter to Nike in 2012 saying, hey, here's my situation as you described, and then him working alongside their innovators to create this shoe. But then, here we are, however many years later, and however many iterations of the shoe later,
Mm-hmm.
and now you've just sort of washed the disability population out of a conversation that was started by somebody with a disability. That's where I think where I feel frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, to say all athletes sort of, to me, relates to like the whole idea of all lives matter. I don't want to get off on a whole tangent about that, but it's the same thing. You're basically saying, we don't see your disability problem. Now you helped us design this cool new shoe and we're going to market to the masses. Right. I think the shoes are like over $100.
They're very
expensive. I also want to add in that a lot of people with disabilities are on fixed incomes, or maybe not able to work full-time gainful jobs in every case. And so you've created a shoe to fix a problem within a community that now can't afford your shoe, or will never be able to access it because when it goes live, you'll sell out. And I actually contacted Nike about that, and their response to me was like, well, sign up for the email alerts and you'll get like the early access or whatever. And I was like, well, you just missed the point. I'm not saying it because I'm a normal consumer. I'm saying it because, like, I want to try this shoe out to understand how it works for people who really have limited dexterity or mobility.
Right. Yeah, that was something that I had noticed, and it's interesting because I think, we hold companies like Nike saying like, oh, they're here for, anti-racism on all levels, and yes, I understand there's work to be done everywhere, but it's like for that one step forward, or that space that you're like, yeah, they were great with anti-racism, like we love all cultures, and then it's like, then you take a step back and you're like, like, and now it's like they're coming in, and also they're coming out with their pregnancy line, but then they also fired Allison Felix when she got pregnant, and it's just like, you just like, you're so close, but then you're still missing the mark, which I get. There's room for improvement and learning and things like that, but when I saw that, I just felt so frustrated as well. And someone else was saying how frustrating that is, and it just is so disappointing because it's making money off of something that you're not even going to address. And I just felt like it wasn't addressed at all. And when I first saw about the FlyEase, I was like, oh, that's really cool. But all the stories that I'd seen about it were like Huffington Post or some other outlet that was talking about the shoe and about the story behind it, and about how it got developed and why it came to be. There were other outlets talking about it, but I never saw Nike really pushing like, this is the story behind it, this is why it's so cool. And now it just looks like a different cool model of a shoe. And that's all. If I wouldn't have known and I went on and I was looking through it, I would have just been like, oh, it's just another cool shoe, and even I remember when it came out, I saw an ad and I was like, that's kind of different. Like, I'm like confused of why that they did that, because I didn't know anything about it. And then later I saw the story and I was like, oh, and it made sense. But I'm like, you never said that.
Yeah. And I think, when they released their most recent one, or when they started advertising for the most recent version of it, I guess there's several different ones that you can choose from. The only people I saw posting about Matthew Walzer were people from the CP and disability community, and like you said, maybe some other outlets. But I mean, maybe they did, but I did not see anywhere where Nike actually addressed it. Exactly what you just said. And I mean, I feel like that's a little embarrassing for it to be your product and to have other people advocating for the story of it when you can't even make space to do that.
Right. When the story is it's a great story. It's showing that, and even if it took, and shoes take a long time to develop, and I understand there's probably development behind it that is, that's unique to that shoe and everything like that. But it's a cool story to share, like, like we did here and we are listening and we are trying. You would think that trying and listening would be a good thing for you to use. But then it's like, it seems like they lost it so much in translation, and then it just became something that was just another release for them. And it's so disappointing.
Yeah.
And like you said, embarrassing, because it's like, ugh. Like you really could have made a difference. And someone just commented too, you commented, imagine the impact it would have had, you know, to have been represented. And that's so true. It's like representation, like we said before, representation matters. Seeing yourself in these ads, seeing yourself as, I can be an athlete. I can be a, you know, I can do anything. It makes such a difference. And I mean, I've seen that in spaces of race, and as I'm sure you have, and people can see that in all different spaces. There are so many different spaces to show inclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the important thing is like inclusion is a choice, right? Like, diversity is a fact. Like disability is going to be there, race is going to be there, ethnicity is going to be there, but the choice to fight for equity and inclusion, that's a choice. And if you're willfully not making it, then you're saying you don't belong. You're not creating space for belonging.
Right. Yeah, and it's so sad, and especially in today, because there's obviously so much that we've been through in the past year, and how much inclusion has mattered, and how many companies are trying to embrace that, I think, and trying to change the story around that. But then, you know, it seems like a lot of lip service when you hear, you know, like, oh, we're all about inclusion, and then you have an opportunity and you miss that opportunity, and it's like, well, are you just saying what you know, what sounds good, or are you only inclusive in these spaces, and then other spaces we're not inclusive in those? We're just like, we're here, like we're going to care about these people, but we're not going to care about these people, when there's like obviously intersectionality, it all crosses over, and you've got to care about the whole.
Yeah. And I can name that, like, no one company can address every issue, right? Because we can just start listing issues from top to bottom and we never end. There are hundreds of thousands of intersections and minority spaces that people exist in. But if you're a company who has the means, the resources, and the social media posts to say that you're going to do something in a specific marginalized space, then I would implore you to act on it. Right.
Yeah. And if they did the work to create the shoe. It's like, you did the work, like the shoe's created. So now, you know, stand behind that product or whatever. Not even necessarily like bashing on Nike again, but like not necessarily just on them. But it's like, if you take the time to create the product, or you take the time to address the issue, then show it for what it fully is, not just, you know, drop it and say, okay, cool, like we did it, cool, like you can't say we didn't do something now. It's like, now follow through in its entirety and really use it to lift up said community that you're trying to actually help.
Yeah. One of the things I love is I'll give a positive example, because I feel like we've been hating on Nike.
I know. I'm
Nike.
I know.
I just want you to do better. But Zappos Adaptive, one of the coolest things that they do is you can actually order 2 different size shoes. I recently found this out.
I have seen that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and that's awesome for people who have that experience, who might wear AFOs. So there are a lot of people in the CP community that use different mobility aids, and that can include braces. And oftentimes those don't fit in normal tennis shoes, and then they have to like cut into the shoe.
Right.
You buy this like $65 pair of shoes, and then you're like cutting them up before you can put them on, so your foot fits in them. And so big applause to Zappos for giving the option to order different size shoes.
Yeah, that is really cool, and something that hopefully becomes more of a norm, because that is it's just a simple way that you can do it. It's not, you know, you're already making the shoe, so it's not something that is a big change or a big ask. It's just a simple thing you can do that really makes a big difference for people. So I think that is really incredible. And I did remember seeing that. So now you said that, I'm like, oh yes, you are correct. I did. And I couldn't remember what company it was, but I'm glad that you brought that up, and that we can give them applause, because it has been a little bit like no one's doing this, but we are having the conversation about how we can do better and how we can make those changes. And so now this question is probably going to err on that side again, of the what we can do. But what are you feeling like gym fitness facilities, just the fitness space in general, are succeeding at in accommodating disability, and what are they really just failing at, if there are any successes? Because like we said at the beginning, there's just not much that has been done to accommodate. So what do you feel like, okay, this is done well, or it's going the right direction, even if it's not quite there yet, but we're headed that direction? And then what is really like where we really need to see the most improvement?
Yeah. So I'll start with a couple of good things. I'll add disclaimer at the beginning that I've not actually participated in or tried any of these things for various reasons, mostly injuries on my part, or just having the reality of CP is like I can't always work out consistently. I just came off of 2 months of rest and rehab. So these are spaces that I want to step into as an adaptive athlete, as a disabled athlete, and as a future coach. But a couple of spaces where I am impressed. Any company that makes an adaptive product for different users. So I've seen straps that will help you hold on to a barbell if you have the loss of a limb. I've seen differently designed like dumbbells or barbells that aren't the traditional way that you would grip it for people with limited dexterity. I mean, the wide availability is not there, but the fact is there are companies making products like that. So want to name that there are companies that are trying to make products that solve problems or speak to experiences in the disabled community. And I think the other two I would mention is Adaptive Training Academy. They're doing an incredible job of putting together an entire program that's nothing but how to work with disabled populations. And I think, don't quote me, is mostly taught from the perspective of people who have different disabilities. And so they're providing a space not only for coaches to learn, but also from firsthand experience. So I haven't been able to do their training. It's virtual right now, which is part of why I've been putting it off. Probably not a great reason, but before COVID, they used to have them in really awesome, like worldwide locations.
Oh, wow.
They'd have it in Germany, or they'd have it, wherever else. And so a friend of mine who's also a CrossFit trainer, we were joking one time, we were like, we should make a trip out of that. Like, we'll go learn and we'll also take a trip. Well, then COVID happened. And so I think both of us are kind of holding off
for that trip.
Take the training in person. So I feel like you lose something in a virtual environment, right? I've taken a couple of certification classes over COVID for TRX and some other things, and I learned a lot, but it is really hard to learn on a screen, and I think there's something to be said for firsthand in-person experience. So kind of holding off on that. And then the other thing I would say is right now, the CrossFit Open is happening for disabled athletes. And so I'm not participating because, like I said, I just came off of injury. But 21.1 is happening. They recently did a huge expansion of how they're defining categories. It's not perfect. There's definitely been some rumbling with some things that they left out. And so, I mean, it's the first year, so I'll give them that. Hopefully they take the feedback and learn for next year. But huge props to the CrossFit Open for totally retooling the program and having town hall discussions about it for disabled athletes to pop on and give an opinion when they were in the process of retooling what this would look like.
That's awesome.
So those are some spaces I think that people really are trying to make some progress.
Yeah, that sounds, I mean, I didn't even know about the CrossFit thing, so thank you for sharing, because I didn't, actually, I'd never heard of that. I mean, I don't know much about the CrossFit world, to be honest, at all. So that's like not really, wasn't something that had been on my radar, but that's really neat to hear that they're making those changes and those, accommodations and trying to be more inclusive.
Yeah. I'm not much of a CrossFitter either. I've taken a total of 2.5 CrossFit classes in my whole life. But I follow a lot of people who are in that space and live in that space, and know a lot more about it. If anyone is interested, I would highly recommend following Stephanie Hammerman. Her Instagram is, I don't know what it is off the top of my head now. I'll have to link it below. But she used to own a CrossFit box, and she has cerebral palsy. Now she does 100% virtual online training, and is a huge part of that disabled community in the CrossFit open space, and is a coach. Super knowledgeable person. She knows way more than I do. So I don't mean to make shameless plugs on here, but I don't know a lot about it. So I'm giving you an option of someone who
yes.
does.
We'll just we give out, we let everybody know about all the people they should know about. So it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what places do you think we need to make the most changes as far as like gyms, studios, anything like that?
Well, I think we've talked about a lot of them. Education for trainers, listening to the disabled population, ask us what would work for you, what won't work, because nobody knows better than the people who live the experience, right? And as I said earlier, each of us only lives a fraction or a sliver of that experience. It's not a monolith, right? So you've got to ask a diverse population of the disability community what will work. But I think also just physical access, if your gym is not set up for someone like me to succeed, then your example of the person who came for a couple of classes but then left, that's going to happen. You're just going to continue to exclude populations. This is one example. No hate on water rowers, because I actually really like them. I like that they simulate water, but they're not very adaptive for someone who is a chair user. Concept twos, they come apart in two pieces. You can put the first part of it on the ground, and someone can sit in their wheelchair or on the ground or on a box and still be able to simulate that rowing experience. You can't necessarily remove the rails from a water rower. So that's just one example. But is your facility and is your equipment set up to be adaptive? And if the equipment is not adaptive, do you have a modified option? When I first started at Orange Theory, I was on that Strider for like a year before I even stepped foot on a treadmill. So I was thankful that there was an option for someone who with lower leg compensation, like I wasn't strong enough to even walk on a treadmill, and now I can use it, but do you have options if you don't have adaptive equipment?
Yeah, that's very important. And I thank you for sharing that, because that is, I think I'm always curious of how we can do better in our spaces, and me personally as a coach as well, because, you never know who's going to come in and walk into your classes and how you may need to accommodate that person. And so always great to hear different opinions and views, and learning as we go along is my hope and goal. But as we wrap up, because we're getting towards the end, my last question is just, how can we be better allies? How can we be better allies for the disabled community?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is make it a forethought and not an afterthought. We alluded to it earlier, but I think oftentimes there's a lot of disconnection or hurt within people who want to maybe enter the fitness space or the disability space in fitness, but there's not a place, right? That place doesn't exist. Like, fitness plus disability doesn't widely exist.
Right.
It's the same issue with like medical care for people with CP. Like, people who specialize in that, for example, for me, are like hundreds of miles away, and I can't find someone locally who knows enough about it. And so I have to settle for this person who kind of knows about it. And that's the same thing for a lot of people when they approach fitness and they have a disability, is I don't see it, so I already feel uncomfortable. So I think, just designing your programs, your gyms, your learning, your education, make disability one of the things that you do first and not last. I think that's a huge thing. listening to voices in that space. I mentioned that earlier. Yeah, I think, and this one's a little touchy. So, I mean, maybe just don't go asking everyone, right? Because we talked about the incidents of the anti-Asian racism and how it's not our job to educate the population right on what's happening. And so I think the same is true in the disability space with a caveat. I think a lot of disabled people want to be heard in spaces where they want to begin to be seen. And so, I mean, maybe just don't go demanding that people answer your questions, but there might be people like me who are super open and would happily share with you some of the experiences or things that they've seen or done or misses that we might have in the community. I mean, I'm learning from other trainers who are also in this space that have disabilities. Like, I'm learning from them every day. Things that I never would consider.
Yeah, I think you posted something about, I think it was you that posted something about like the term special needs, and that you hadn't, was that you that posted about it? Maybe not.
I don't know that
it was like a repost of somebody who had like posted about not using the term special needs, about how like we wouldn't call like other needs special just because they're different. Like, it's not a special need, it's just a different need. And I don't remember if you posted or someone else, but it really made me think about using that term, because it was a term that I grew up thinking was okay, or thought, oh, this is the term that we were supposed to use. And then as I saw that, and it was like, you know, you're not going to say, like, if someone's gluten-free, you're not going to be like, oh, I have like, that's a special need. Like, it's just a different need, and using, you know, not using that term. So I couldn't remember, but that was just something that kind of had came up to me, because that was something I didn't know. And I'm still learning that. And it was like, oh, not using that term. And I was like, oh, wow, I never heard about that or even thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, everybody's going to have a different opinion, right? You're going to have, obviously, you're not ever going to have 100% consensus.
Right.
I think largely what I've seen is the disabled population is like, say disabled, right? That's what it is.
Right.
And so things like, I think terms like special needs or differently abled were created not by people in the disability community. They were created by people who are non-disabled, who it's uncomfortable to say the word disabled. But I mean, now you're putting language on something that you don't experience. And in our world, we call that ableist. Right. If you're refusing to acknowledge who I am and what it is, then we call that ableist language. And so I think, special needs is one, differently abled is one. I'm sure there's more that I can't think of right now.
Right.
But I would say probably a majority of people that I've seen, especially over CP Awareness Month, have just sort of said, like, say the word disabled. That's what it is. And I mean, I don't mind the term adaptive, but I do know some disabled people who are bothered by it. I don't mind it because I think it's true of what I do. I modify and adapt. So for me, it doesn't bother me, but that's an individualistic sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the same as, as we were learning through with everything that happened this summer, and the same that goes with race, and it's like, call us Black. And, people are like, oh, like African-American, it's like, just say I'm Black, I'm Black. It's the same kind of thing. And because you're the person that is experiencing it, it's, this is what, and people were doing it out of their comfort level instead of the comfort level of the person that's actually in the experience. So I really appreciate you saying that as well. Cause for me, I think it's the same thing that I experienced in a different way, of people coming to me during Black Lives Matter, like, well, I don't know how to say it. I don't want to offend you. I don't know how to ask this. I don't, and for me, I'm like, just say it. And if it's offensive, I'll let you know. And I'll be like, hey, maybe don't say that again. But I realize kind of in the same sense, I'm feeling it backwards of like making sure I don't say anything offensive, or like, oh, can I say this? Is that okay? And having to allow myself grace and be like, okay, like, address it from a point of like, I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to learn. So if I say anything, like, please let me know. Like, I want to do it right, but we're not going to do it right every time. And I might say something that's like way wrong, and someone could be like, hey, like, that's way off. Like, we don't say that. That's not, that's not how I would prefer you say that. And then you learn. But I'm trying to give myself that same grace, backwards, of saying like, it's okay if you say the wrong thing. Like, you're trying to have the conversation, and that's what matters. And you're trying to learn.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you just exactly said it, right? It's like, one, what is your posture when you're saying it? And two, as long as your posture is not meant to be offensive or hateful, then I would rather you say it and say it wrong than not say it at all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? I think we spend so much time in marginalized communities, in ethnic communities, tiptoeing around things,
Yeah.
and that's part of what has got us where we are today with Black Lives Matter, with
Right.
Stop AAPI Hate. Like, all of this is born out of systems that are created to oppress and to cast away and to like not engage in the difficult conversations. Right. And so for me personally, whether you're talking to me about my disability, about being an adoptee, about being Asian American or Korean, like, name it. Name it.
Right.
And if you say it, like you said, if you say it wrong, I'll tell you. But I would
Right.
rather you say it and engage with me and have that conversation. If your spirit is prompting you to say something to me and you're coming at it as best you know how, I'm not typically going to be offended by that if your attempt is not an overt, hateful comment.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we are wrapping up on time, but I just want to thank you so much. I want to give you a second, actually, too, to share your Instagram handle where people can find you, because you have, like I said at the beginning, you're a wealth of knowledge. You have so many different topics that you cover, and I'd love people to be able to follow you and learn some more from you as well.
Yeah, for sure. So my Instagram handle is at Lauren Burke Fit. So just my name with the word fit at the end. It's also the same on Twitter, although I'm not on there very often. And I don't have a website. So it's just my Instagram. It's too much to keep up with so many social media channels.
Oh, girl,
so, yeah,
I got on TikTok after I swore I would never get on TikTok. I'm like, I'm never getting on TikTok. And I'm like, why am I on TikTok? I don't have time to be on TikTok. I don't have time to do any of this. But here I am,
But you know what? I have to say before we wrap up, like, I did not know that you could sing like that because you hadn't shared that gift with the world. And so when you started reposting your TikToks up on your Instagram, I was like, yes, girl, get it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
No shame in your TikTok game.
I rarely do it because I still am like, I don't have time to be on TikTok. But when I do, I'm like, let me spend 5 hours here, which is why I don't do it, because I'm like, oh, let me do this. Oh, I'm going to do this song. So, well, thank you. I enjoy doing it. I'll be doing some more of that. But I'm just so grateful to you for just sharing your heart with us and sharing your passion for fitness and inclusion, and also just the beginning of sharing everything about current events and what's going on in the AAPI community. And I just really appreciate just you spending time with us. And I know a lot of people are commenting how much they love the conversation. So if you guys want to miss any of this conversation, please go back to the beginning. It's going to be posted to IGTV right after this. And then it will also be on podcast. My computer's broken, so it'll actually be up this weekend because I have to get a new computer. So it will be up this weekend, and I will post as soon as it's up for consumption on Spotify and anywhere that you find your podcasts. But it will be up to watch on video very, very soon. So as soon as this is over, and I put some captions under it. But thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate everything.
Yeah, thank you so much. I so appreciate your willingness to engage in these conversations, to be an ally. I mean, I know we kind of said it kind of has gone back and forth between the summer and now. I stand with you, and I feel and know that you stand with me. So I so appreciate just the space for conversations and disability, and even just addressing the events in Atlanta.
Yes, well, thank you. And I will be following you. I'll be finding you on Instagram and messaging you every day. So, and hopefully one day we'll meet soon in person.
Yes, I would love that. I have not been to the West Coast, so it's
come on out. I'm ready for you. Well,
yeah, I'll take your class.
Yes, please do. All right, I'll talk to you later.
All right, see you.
Bye.